Hi, I'm David Blacker. Welcome to my fourth installment on Swingin' the Blues. And in this one, we're going to look at a Charlie Parker solo over the tune Tiny's Tempo. There's obviously some great guitar work in that song as well. But the horn solo really grabbed my ear, and I just kind of started breaking it down. And I realized, this thing makes a great lesson for a couple reasons. One, it's in the key of B flat, and it focuses on this 10th to 13th fret range, and we're so often in this whole, standard kind of box here that I thought it was good for that reason, because it forced me to really think about the chords I'm playing off of. And secondly, Charlie Parker's obviously, genius, and his lines are flowing through the changes in such a way that it really kind of outlines some interesting opportunities for note targeting and stuff like that, and reharmonizing a basic blues progression. So I thought it was a really good study in the end, and wanted to turn it into a lesson. If you're interested in the full lesson package, you can go to the link below, and it'll be on my site with the tab and additional materials and stuff like that. But right here, we're going to get into lesson one, or solo one, from the intro, and there's a ton of stuff in there to get started with, and I'm going to break all that down. So without further ado, let's jump into that. So this is a pretty straight ahead jazz blues in the key of B flat, and one of the key takeaways of this piece, before I get into breaking it down, is that most of it happens between the 10th and 13th frets. So it's kind of like, if we're used to, this area here, which I am particularly much more comfortable here than I am, say, playing all the changes in a certain little zone, like 10th to 13th fret. I mean, certainly we all have licks that go up in here and stuff like that, but really knowing the changes in this area is going to really make the difference in a lot of ways, and open up the fretboard. So that was one of the reasons I found this such a useful lesson and exercise. So before we get into the licks, maybe let's just pick out some chords in this zone, 10th to 13th fret, so we're familiar with what's kind of happening there and what we're playing off of, So of course we have this kind of, and I'm not going to necessarily, spell out each chord. I can play the notes, arpeggiate the notes, so you can kind of pick it out on your own, because I want to get to the solo. But I wanted to point out that, you got a B flat 7 here with the major third on top and bottom. We could just move our pinky back, and we've got a B flat 6, and more commonly without that major third in the bass, because it sounds almost minor-y, which is cool actually. But we've got that one too, which is just basically the same chord without that B flat major third in the bottom. So those are some shapes there. Of course, we have our 9 and the 13 as you extend it up. Slide up a whole step with the top half of the chord. So those are all kind of our B flat chords to work with, or some. And then, for E flat, which is our 4 chord, we have a straight ahead E flat 7, and we can move our pinky, which is on the 14th fret of the B, we can move it down a half step. We could do a E flat 13 style chord. We could add the 9 on top if we wanted to, and then we could do an E flat 7, flat 9 for that second measure of the 4 chord, which is something I kind of get into a lot in past lessons and courses and stuff. And then we can come back into kind of like a little B flat triad there with the 7 in the bass and the 5 on top. And then for the 2, the minor. Oh, actually, before we get to the 2, we have the transition into the 2. So we can transition from D minor here, go straight ahead. There, we can do it like that. We can even do it like into the 2 there. Or it's another way. So these are just a few variations, and then of course for the C you could use this shape or this shape, and so the C being the minor 2, the 5 you could use like a hideaway chord, and or you could come up here, even though we're kind of cheating, we're going past the 13th fret, but you got this, or you could use a acoustic 9s or hard dominant 9s for the F, and then back to the 1. So, experiment with that. Just get yourself comfortable with the chord shapes, because we're going to be playing off of a lot of them. Also, I just want to note that you can at any point, to hear the solo in its full thing, is just rewind this video to the very beginning, where I play through the whole thing with a track, and you can, within YouTube, just slow it down. There's a settings knob there on the video, and you can set it to 50%. So I'll do my best to kind of walk through these licks. There's not a lot of space between a lot of them, so if you need that backing track to kind of really illustrate where the bars are falling, that will be helpful. So I'll play through the first 2 measures, and then we'll break it on down. So here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so basically we're outlining a B flat major triad, right? So just 5 on the sliding into the 10th fret of the G with your first finger. There's the root on the 11th fret of the B, major 3rd, 5 on top. Pick the 4 on the 11th fret of the high E, hammer on pull off from the 3rd to the 4. There's the 9, root, dominant 7. And then we slide into the major 3rd of the 4 chord. So we slide in major 3rd of the 4 chord, pick the 5 there on the 11th fret of the B. There's a 6, half step bend, hammer on pull off, and then resolves to that major 3rd again of the 4 chord. So and then we have a series of kind of descending lines that really outline this kind of dominant sound, B flat dominant. So the first is a chromatic line that goes, right, just 13 to 10 on the B string, and resolves on the A flat note on the 13th fret of the G, right, and then we slide in to the 12th fret of the G, go to the 11th fret with our index finger, and grab the 12th fret of the D with our middle finger, and then we slide into the the 10th fret of the D, 13th fret of the A, and the 11th fret of the A. So one more time. Right, really all those kind of really nice dominant sounds. We've got chromatic down from the 9 to the dominant 7, then we go 6 to sharp 5, which is a nice dominant altered kind of sound instead of the normal 5, that F sharp, which we hear a lot as a kind of leading tone into the 4 chord when we're comping, especially like voice leading happening on that B string. There's that sharp 5, that F sharp, and then 9 root 7, right? All super cool dominant sounds, and then we have a series of kind of like arpeggio riffs that imply the 4 chord before it actually happens. So here it is. And the actual downbeat of the 4 chord happens midway through this riff. So this riff is we slide from the 9 to the 10 on the A string, pick the 13th fret with our pinky on the A string. There's the 11th fret with our middle finger of the D, and there's our downbeat of the 4 chord on that F note, which would be the 9 of the 4 chord. Right? So we just walk it back down. Walk the arpeggio back down. Sorry. So we got from the chromatic line, we got right, and then the next set of riffs is, and that's pretty cool. It's like a middle finger, 11th fret of the D, root on the 13th fret, your pinky, 13th fret of the A, first finger, 10th fret of the D, and then we slide. I use my pinky here, you could use your ring too. 12th fret of the D for that E note, which we'll talk about in a second, to the E flat. So what's cool about that is really what's happening there is that classic kind of voice leading to that second measure of the 4 chord, spelling out that flat 9 sound, and the flat 9 being usually it's a half step above the chord, the chordal center you're on. So if it's E flat, our flat 9 is E, right? And it really creates that tension, voice leading, back to the 1 chord, to the B flat. So that's something to take note of there, because I think it's a really cool riff. The whole thing, so many notes, not necessarily more notes is better, but like all these notes weaving through changes, perfectly setting up the targeting. And one of the cool things, like I said earlier, is that we're implying the change to the 4 with this arpeggio. So all of this is really, the first part of it is still over the 1 chord, but it really doesn't make that much sense to have a D flat over the 1 chord, which is flat 3rd, So it's really at this point much more saying, hey, I'm talking about the 4 chord now, because I got the major 3rd, the G, the 5, the 7, and there's the 9 for the downbeat of the 4 chord. So it's really like, spelling the 4 before we get there, and landing on a great kind of extension, being a 9 for the 4 chord, not landing on the root or anything like that. So some real key elements to take note of there. So why don't we review? I'll play through the whole thing once, and real slow, and then we'll look at some other ideas. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've come that far, and then resolving back to the one is real simple. So just root with your pinky, 13th fret of the A. Pick the 9 there on the 10th fret of the D, and just hammer on without other picks. So so that's the riff there. So now we're coming into this, into the 2-5-1. So we go 3, 4, 1, 2. Okay, so that's the next riff, which basically is outlining this D minor, D flat minor, into the C minor too, and we've got sliding into the root of D, 12th fret D string with a ring finger, 10 of G with index, 10 of B with index, and then we grab 13th fret of B, 12th, 11, 10, 12th of G, 10 of G, and landing on that E flat, right? To really accentuate that minor 2, that E flat note, and then we have basically more notes in the C minor wheelhouse. 10th fret of the A, to the 13th fret of the A, to the 12th fret of the D, and then a little hammer on pull off from the C to the C sharp to the C, 10th, 11th, 10. So next we have okay, so basically let's walk through that and then I'll break it down. We're sliding into the 10th, from the 9 to the 10 on the D with our first finger, picking up the 13th fret of the D with our pinky or ring, grabbing the 11th fret of the G with our middle, then hammer on pull off from 10, 11, 10 on the G string, and then walking down a B flat major scale, so 13, 12, 10, root on the 13th fret of the A, 10th fret of the, now we're just kind of vamping a little 10th fret of the D, 13th fret of the A again, and then 2 hits on the octave. Let me play it one more time. So let's take a step back now, and well, actually, before we take a step back, let's just point out what's kind of really key about this turnaround. We have this sound, I think, is the big takeaway. That so over the 5 chord now, so we're basically just outlining the 5 and the 1 of the 2-5-1, because we're over the F and the B flat. Now over this F, we're coming in here and we're grabbing that F sharp, and we're trilling back to the F. So, and that creates a really nice tension back to the 1 chord, that flat 9 of the 5 chord, and it's something you hear in a lot of Charlie Parker's 2-5-1 riffs. So let's walk through the whole thing. Let's rewind and go from the that riff right there. So here we go. it's really good to, this is a great solo, a great opportunity I found to just take it and put it in other areas, because it's being horn based, it's kind of doesn't lead itself to very easy guitar fingerings, and it's just a good opportunity, and it falls nicely in other places. So let's take a look at like a B flat here. Okay, so if we're borrowing basically the 3rd fret of the D, G, and B strings, and we're going to slide in, we're basically going to play our same riff there, we're going to play it here. And then we could, but it's a little low sounding, right? So I'm not going to go through this note by note because I don't want to digress too far, but basically I'll play it slow, and I'm going to introduce another octave to play it in. And once we get to the, I'm going to introduce another octave to play it in. So we're going to mix and match octaves a little bit. So here it goes. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so what we did there was we stayed here in this position for, basically playing off of this chord, and then we did playing off of this E flat here, and then we did our chromatic walk here, right, this chromatic walk. And then instead of going down, which we could do and could be equally as cool, I just switched over here to, so transpose that whole thing there. I could have picked up this G, F sharp, D here, of course. This position, but because I favor this position, I came here. But really, it creates a lot of opportunities for mixing and mashing these ideas. So that's basically it. Again, you can go back to the front video to kind of hear the whole thing through and mix and match these licks up with it. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you're interested in the full lesson package, you can get the that has the both choruses tabbed out and breakdowns and additional material and all that, link beneath the video. All right, till next time, take care.